All right, so last but not least, let's go ahead and identify what is required to prepare for EOY 4, including special education program, services, and post-secondary preparation. So the EOY 4 submission data comes exclusively from your special education data system, or SEDS. However, LEAs and data coordinators need to monitor the snapshot and validation errors because many errors are related to the enrollment type and special education plan type code. Students with disabilities data is used to meet the requirements of Section 6 to 18 of the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, or IDEA. So you as data coordinators will need to monitor your special education data, particularly the snapshot reports and validation errors, because there is a tie between enrollment and special education plan type that will tie you to the EOY 4 data collection. The files that are used to submit this data are the special education, or SPED file, which is used to identify special education eligibility, indicate an end to eligibility, and report program settings. There's also the student services, or SSRV file, which reports prescribed services related to initial and plan review meetings. And then finally, we have the post-secondary status, or PSTS file, which provides outcomes for a student with disability a year after leaving secondary or K through 12 education. Just a quick note that this will change with the special education redesign for the 23 to 24 academic year, but we'll be providing guidance specifically for this academic year for 22 to 23. It's essential for an early start and a successful finish of EOY 4 to identify and establish relationships with the staff involved in the data submission. And for EOY 4, this includes school site staff, special education staff, your CELPA directors, your school site administrators, your student system support staff, and student families. So it's important to reach out to and build and maintain relationships with these folks early and often to guarantee a successful EOY 4. And that's part of the coalition building competency with CALPADS. Let's talk about pre-snapshot submission activities. So what you are able to do prior to May 8th. So special education data coordinators are usually pretty good about submitting records for students with disabilities in a timely manner. The CALPADS View Submission screen consistently shows frequent activity for most LEAs for the SPED and SSRV file types. This submission is ongoing, and the data is currently being submitted now, with the exception of the PSTS file. So SPED and SSRV files are currently being submitted to CALPADS from the Special Education Data System, or SEDS. The PSTS file, however, is often overlooked as this data is not needed prior to EOY 4. Data coordinators may want to encourage the submission of PSTS records as well. This may help to identify any students who are not surveyed and still need to be as a requirement of IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. All right, so those PSTS surveys are a common pain point in EOY 4. Simply identifying who should be surveyed can cause confusion. Remember that this data is submitted from the Special Education Data System and has been collected for several years. County Offices of Education and CELPAs can assist new special education coordinators, as well as attend end of year or post-secondary status specific training. You should encourage your special education data coordinators to submit these post-secondary status outcomes as soon as possible to allow for reconciliation of data and accounting of students who have yet to provide responses. And while we're here on the PSTS survey slide, let's go ahead and navigate back to the user manual for the post-secondary status page here. And you can get here by clicking on functionality map at the ribbon at the top of the page, then online maintenance, student maintenance, and post-secondary status is the second from the bottom here. So this will take you to the CALPADS user manual page for the post-secondary status or PSTS file type. This file is relevant for CTE completers in Fall 2 and relevant for special education students in EOY 4. And so there is information for both Fall 2 and EOY 4 contained on this page. If we scroll pretty far down here, let me see, we will find a section, it looks like it's about 3/4 of the way down the page here. The section is titled, Which Students Require Post-Secondary Status Records in the EOY Submission? And it gives you the criteria to determine what students will need to be surveyed for the post-secondary status record in these two columns here. And you can work with your special education data coordinator in order to determine the students who will need to be surveyed. That special education data coordinator will be distributing and collecting the surveys and populating it into the special education data system, but you will also need to populate it into CALPADS. So work on that coalition building with your special education data coordinator for determining students who will require post-secondary status records in EOY 4. If we scroll a little bit down, we can see how the PSTS data is used by the state to calculate State Performance Plan Indicator 14. And there's a hierarchy with regards to these post-secondary status outcomes, with higher education always receiving the kind of highest rank in the hierarchy, followed by competitive employment. And you can kind of see how we progress down this list here. So that's a bit about how the PSTS data is used, and then who we are required to survey for the PSTS records in EOY 4. While we're on the post-secondary status user manual page, Nate, is there anything you'd like to point out in addition?
Yes. One thing I want to point out is Kyron is our resident PSTS expert. So if you have any questions, reach out to Kyron. That's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Nate. And thank you, Kyron, for your generous expertise with post-secondary status records.
My pleasure.
It's my pleasure as well.
All right. So that is a common pain point in EOY 4 with the PSTS survey there. Let's go ahead and look at our EOY 4 reports. For end of year 4, there are 5 aggregate reports, and they're shown on the left in orange, or I guess salmon, Marshall's favorite color, but not food, on the left-hand side of the slide here. They are reports 16.1, 16.2, 16.5, 16.9, and 17.3. Those are the reports that you will need to review and approve in order to certify the end of year 4 data submission. There are also multiple supporting reports. Those are listed on the right in blue or purple, and they are reports 16.3, 16.6, 16.10, and 17.4. So these provide more specific counts or detailed lists of students who were counted in the aggregate reports on the left. For most LEAs, these reports can be pulled at the start of the end of year on May 8th and monitored until you're ready for certification. CELPAs will typically wait until they can review an LEA approved revision. So it is in the interest of timing and often the interest of the LEA to approve early, if for no other reason than to help the CELPA to start their review of these reports early. And remember, the arrows on the slide here show how the reports link to other reports. So your salmon reports are the aggregate reports that you'll need to review and approve in order to certify, and they point to reports that support them and help you to understand counts involved in these aggregate reports. So report 16.3 Students with Disabilities Profile List is a supporting report that helps you to understand both Report 16.1, Students with Disabilities Education Plan Type by Primary Disability Count, and Report 16.2, Student with Disabilities Count by Federal Setting. Report 16.6, Student with Disabilities Student Services Student List, helps you to understand and interpret the numbers on Report 16.5, Students with Disabilities Student Services Count. So these reports, again, in blue or purple on the right-hand side, support the aggregate reports on the left-hand side, and the relationship is shown by these arrows here. Again, there are report mapping guides for all of these reports in the CALPADS user manual. So if you are wondering how CALPADS arrived at a certain count in a particular column, the CALPADS report mapping guides will tell you exactly where CALPADS pulled that data in order to arrive at that count. The report mapping guides will assist with data elements that are used in the counts, particularly for the aggregate reports. All right, so PSTS data can be submitted at any time. We do recommend that PSTS records are submitted now if possible, because again, having data submitted early allows you to review your reports and access the data collection and take further actions, like reaching out to students in order to provide them surveys and collect that survey information. PSTS data, again, can be submitted at any time, and we recommend making a practice of uploading PSTS data just prior to the start of the end of year submission, so just prior to May 8th, so that the reports will show you the students and their outcomes when you receive your first snapshot on May 8th or May 9th, depending on how quickly CALPADS processes your data. This again will allow the special education team to target those who have yet to respond to the PSTS survey. And we do, again, have a plethora of training and guidance resources available for you for EOY 4. We've got our mainstays of the CALPADS user manual. This has the 3 file types linked to on this slide, with the special education or SPED file type, the student services or SSRV file type, and the post-secondary status or PSTS file type. We did navigate to this third link in the training here. I won't navigate to these two, but they do contain very helpful information for you to review and utilize for guidance when submitting those SPED and SSRV records and when resolving any validation errors regarding those records. We've got the CSIS YouTube training channel. I think Nate did a fantastic job of pointing out how these data population training playlists can be helpful for you for specific file types. And then the reporting and certification trainings are available on the CSIS YouTube training channel, as well as the Bridge LMS. We've also got CALPADS flashes and FAQs for guidance regarding reporting your students with disabilities in EOY 4. The DSEA guidance can be particularly helpful for staff to determine who to report as the DSEA. All right, so that is the EOY 4 lesson or section of this training. I'll go ahead and throw it back over to Nate to discuss reminders before going into the EOY data submission.